Barbara, I am so happy and delighted we have the opportunity to talk together today. About a year ago, we had a conversation that completely changed my mind, or what I used to think about when we talk about climate change. I used to be a little bit of a fatalist. I wouldn't say like a skeptical, but like a person who is more like whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But after the conversation we had, I started to look at things very, very differently. So I'm very glad you found the time to be here with us today. Our podcast is called Žaliuoju, which means pretty much going green. Now we're going to be talking about climate change. And so you are not only a tech entrepreneur, you're a very high profile tech entrepreneur, you're also a space entrepreneur.
Yeah, a space and an earth entrepreneur. So I'm so happy to see you first, and I'm very touched by what you just said. I very clearly remember our conversation a year ago. Very intense about the future of our planet, the future of humanity, and how we can contribute. But yes, I'm a space entrepreneur and an earth entrepreneur. What we're doing is basically we're building a framework for sustainable living on this planet and on other planets. So we're designing what I call closed ecological station. So places that are built where everything you breathe, eat, drink is directly produced inside the station and completely recycled. So completely closed loop regenerative ecosystem. First for Earth application. And then in the future, eventually on the moon, but most likely on Mars 15 years from now.
Okay, so you are preparing the habitats for humans to go all the way up to the moon and beyond, even to Mars. So just so it's very clear for everybody, they're like these domes or these structures where you have water, you maintain the balance of air, you're also growing food.
Yes.
So basically it's a life support system we need to travel to these faraway places.
Exactly. It's a life support system we need to survive on another planet, but it's also system that we can use on Earth to create villages that are completely regenerative and recycling everything. So it means that the tools that we are building not only help to settle on another planet on the future, but it also helps us here on Earth design greenhouse, aeroponic system, water treatment system, waste management system. So you can build a small city on this planet that is completely, environmental friendly, local growing food. So it's an interesting parallel, thinking of another planet to benefit the Earth.
Well, see, here's the funny thing. I remember when we had that conversation, we were in Paris, and you were telling me that you're like a space entrepreneur preparing us to go to Mars. And I said, do you really think things on Earth are so fucked that we need to be thinking about leaving? And I loved your response when you explained to me that, actually our Earth is.
Yeah, it's, how can I put that? So it's amazing we have life on Earth. Like if you think about it like for 2 seconds and you're like, okay, this planet is like localized, like at a special point, not too close to the sun, not too far to the sun, and a combination of different things and allowed life to thrive on Earth. And it took 4.5 billion years basically to have this life, which is very, very rich, very amazing what we have on Earth. And so far, we haven't found any place like Earth on our universe. We find exoplanets and very similar things, but this very particular, life and sentient life, so life that has a conscious of itself, it is very unique and it's amazing. And for me, the fact that humans are interested in going to other planets and becoming a multi-planet species, this is not something that is against nature. For me, we are part of nature, and if lives want to go and expand, and so we expand to another planet. I don't see that as a leaving the Earth to go to another planet. No, at a certain point, Earth and Mars, that was like all together. So it's not different. In my vision of the world, it's like everything's interconnected and was all one at the beginning. So yeah.
But also the point that this is, our Earth is a spaceship in itself.
Yes, it is.
It's you were telling me it's very fragile, the ecosystem, and people don't understand how fragile exactly the balance of air,
Yeah.
water, and all these other elements are.
Yeah. Yes, it's very fragile. And if you talk to astronauts and you listen to them, they will all tell you that there is this very. So first, there is a unique feeling when you go into space that you realize that this very thin, blue layer is protecting us from the void, and from up there you realize how fragile, beautiful, and there are no countries, you can't see borders from space, and so you realize the interconnectors and how beautiful this biosphere is. And I think it took a little bit of time, too much time. It's still taking too much time for humans to realize that it's a closed ecosystem, so it's a finite world. So it means that any action that you do on this planet as a reaction, and because Earth is quite big compared to the size of the human. Humans don't realize that when they do something, it has an effect. And so it took us too much time to realize that the action of, going in the ground and taking the fossil fuel out of the planet had actually an impact on the climate. And now we've been realizing that for the past 20 years, and there is this feeling of emergency right now. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I mean, to really understand how, because people don't get it. I mean, when I use that example and I tell people, it's like, we are on a very delicate spaceship. We have no cognitive way of verifying this information. Like the way we have flat earthers today go, no, the world looks very flat to us, And so actually working on this, look, like there's a question I always get. And people say, hey, yeah, I see climate is changing, but I don't believe that it's human beings making this happen.
There are definitely cycles on our planet. Like the planet is warming up, is cooling down. So there have been cycles for like millions of years. But the thing is, the human activity is definitely accelerating the global warming, and it's very simple. It's just because we're putting so much CO2 and we're warming up the atmosphere. The way it's mostly construction and electricity that is generating so much CO2 in the atmosphere that it's accelerating global warming. I think it's hard for people to admit that they're contributing to that. At a certain point, you need to face the reality of your action, and maybe not everybody's there yet, but we're going there. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. One of the things you mentioned was how delicate the balance of the air is, and so we can even have these special cycles or processes that when we pass a certain level of emissions, where we start to enter uncharted territories. And we're almost at the tipping point. Is that right? Where even scientific projections or mathematical projections can't really foresee what the outcomes are.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about, those CO2 levels and how they can spiral out of control?
So I'm not a climatologist, but I'll try to answer the question with my best knowledge.
Okay.
So when the level of CO2 are rising up, it triggers a lot of different action. So the first thing also to remember is that, planting trees is awesome because it's helping, of course, reducing the level of CO2. But people have to keep in mind that after a certain level of CO2 in the atmosphere, the trees cannot process more CO2 than expected. So it means that we can plant trees and slow down the capture more of the CO2. But then for plants, after a certain point, when we reach too high of a level of CO2 in the atmosphere, then it's plateau. So it's a temporary solution, but it's not like a full long-term solution. It's very important we're doing now, but not completely. It doesn't after reaching a certain point, it's not going to help us anymore. So it's important that we don't reach this tipping point where trees basically cannot process the excess of CO2 that is in the atmosphere. We are far from it, but that might be a concern in like 100, 150 years from now.
Okay.
Then with the so CO2 going in the atmosphere basically, and you have the gaz à effet de serre in French, I forgot the name in English, but so it's warming up, and basically so you have the ice balls that are melting, and one of the main concern right now about the poles is if you don't have ice, then you stop cooling down also the atmosphere of the planet, and also you have the release of bacteria and viruses that have been like encaptured into the ice for millions and millions of years. So we don't know how it will impact the biodiversity. And how the living beings on this planet, who are designed to live on a planet like right now and not on a planet that was working like a million years ago, we don't know how it's going to react. Another thing is that when you have the CO2 level rising, it triggers the acidification of the ocean. And the thing is that the air we're breathing, the oxygen we're breathing, it's not mostly coming from trees. This is like a misbelief in most of us. It's coming from the ocean. So it's what is called the diatomies. They are like small planktons, and basically they feed themselves in the ocean. They produce more than 55% of the oxygen that we're breathing. So trees it's very important because it helps regulate the CO2. It also generates O2, but most of the O2 that is generated is actually completely consumed by the biodiversity and the animals living around the forest. And so most of the CO2 is coming from the ocean. But as the level of CO2 is rising, temperature is rising, the ocean are getting more acidic, and those beings, those plankton, this diatomies, they're dying because of the acidification of the ocean. So it's like kind of like this cascade, that is happening. Yeah. Sound a bit distal. Yeah.
And you that's so because sometimes people think that the solution is simple, but the problem is that the problem is very complex as well. And you've encountered that in your experiments, how you're trying to balance out, and I don't think people understand the complexity. Can you tell us about how difficult it is to make a self-sustaining system where you have air, water, and all the gases in a beautiful state of balance?
So it's complicated, but it's complex, but it's not complicated. Okay. So it's it works if you try to close the loop as much as possible. So it's really focusing on how to reuse things, and so you don't break the circle and the movements. And so you really have to go through like all the different parts, like generating, oxygen, recycling everything. And the waste part is one of the most important ones, because if you don't recycle properly, so basically you end up unbalancing the system. So that's one thing for us that was very. When we run like all the simulation, we figured that actually depending on which waste system we were putting in place and how we were organizing the waste system, it had a huge impact on the overall equilibrium of all the systems. When you make a parallel with the Earth, you're like, yeah, that's actually making a lot of sense. We're not recycling, and part of this behavior of not recycling and at completely closing the loop, it's what is creating right now most of the imbalances that we have on Earth. So So
it's all to do with what people are saying about regenerative systems.
Exactly.
It's going a step beyond, just standard ecology, but actually understanding that everything is interdependent, everything feeds off everything else, everything is connected in one way or another. Can you tell me some of the most interesting things you've learned by doing these regenerative models? Because in a way, you are playing creating Earth, right? You're in a way you're playing God. I think would be one way of saying it. So for me, it's very curious to know what are some of the most interesting lessons you've learned, apart, for example, the waste.
Engineering. when it comes to science, we learned a lot. We still learn. We're always learning. So we studying plants. We see how they react, how we can create the best environment for them. You learn a lot of different things. I mean, it's hard to tell because every day I don't know how much things I'm learning that are new and discovering. I don't know. At the beginning, I was not sure it was feasible. And the more we advance, that the less risk I see.
Last year when we spoke, you made it very clear that it is super difficult to get this balance right. But obviously, like everything in life, the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? The more you start to understand. And so I'm struck with one thing is with all this knowledge we have onto how to recapture carbon, deal with acidification, deal with climate change, because all these things are completely interdependent. How important do you think the process of conscientiousness is? I mean, how, because one thing is explaining it to people, but how do you feel on your side of the spectrum where you see what the effects of inaction are or of disbalance are, and people are not listening?
I'm an optimistic, so I will say that I believe there is a very strong awakening that has been that is currently happening. I don't know. I felt like it was always there, but I felt kind of an acceleration that started a few years ago. So more and more getting, more conscious. There is if you look at humanity, religion, belief, connection with the earth, no matter their religion or which civilization, was always there. And then there was a time after the post-industrial basically civilization where we a little bit disconnected from like the, faith, belief, everything that are linked with, global consciousness and it was science and technology that was dominating the world for like maybe 200 years, a little bit less. Now it's kind of like coming back, and it's completely normal. And so it's very interesting because we are a little bit smarter than we were before. We still don't understand the universe. We believe we made a lot of progress. I think we did a little bit, but so we now we are at a stage when we have more technology, more understanding or belief or better understanding of the universe, and we're getting away a little bit from science and technology because it's not working as an ideal for a society, and this is what we can see right now. And so I think now we are going back to finding the more connecting with the spirituality. So it's very interesting to have like the both getting together, and I think it's very promising for the future because technology is just a tool. It's like money. Like if you seek technology like you seek money, it doesn't make any sense because you're chasing a tool. And now we have this consciousness of that. And so if we put a very good intention, we can use technology as a tool to deliver it. That's so, yeah. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, that's super. That's very interesting because a lot of people, I have a friend who's a technologist who says, a futurologist, and she speaks a lot about the dichotomy between technology and, growth in technology, exponential growth in technology, and the linear growth of consciousness. And so you have a problem where you have too much technology in the hands of people which are morally foolish. And I find it so interesting that despite the fact that what you're doing is very much based in science and in technology, that you're saying that the problem we have is a disbalance of a conscientious nature of that there's a disconnection with what really matters. And that's what has brought us here. Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's almost like the solution, we're looking for technological solutions when the solution has to be you know, from the heart or from the mind or from a conscientious perspective. But having the information and the data is super important, I guess.
Yeah, it's we are very interesting machine or beings, depending how you see the word, or algorithm. If you believe we are, you know, kind of reality simulation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I wanted to say. Yeah, I think there is a catching up of the. It was a little bit hidden for some time.
Mm-hmm.
This connection with like the global consciousness, and now it's catching up basically with the advancement in technology, which is also very interesting, because if you look at the, you know, the most important people who build the, you know, the biggest technology company in the world, they're all very conscious and aware, and they're all doing this process of, you know, the communities.
I know,
and, you know, you understand what I'm saying.
The tech hippies.
Yeah, we call them. But if you like, all of them, basically, everybody's in this like global movement and very aware of those topics about, like, you know, the need for, you know, consciousness to global consciousness and to rely into it. I think actually they tap into the global consciousness to build what they're building, but that's not the, the question here. Now, what I wanted to say is that the link between nature and human and technology, I found it. I'm sorry, Sarah, some work you can hear.
It's okay. It's music. It's music.
Yes, it's music. I believe humans are creating technology, which is just, we are copy pasting nature. Mm-hmm. I think we're so, it's kind of cute. You know, you create like a microphone, which is like basically, you know, replicating how a hair is working. We create sensors that are getting some data and information that maybe we used to get from just listening to our bodies, because it has a lot of sensors, it understands a lot of things, and combining with the and we're very funny because we create this technology and like the internet and the network, which is very similar to what is existing in nature already. So I don't know, I think technology is a mirror of the understanding of nature by humans.
I'd love to touch on that because you are an entrepreneur, and you mentioned something very interesting. Is like, yeah, we have a lot of friends which are, say, people in tech, people who work with investments, and you know, to many ordinary human beings, many people think that business is the reason the world has gone the wrong way. You know, industrialization, you know, the way that the economy is set up to actually exploit our natural resources that, rather than create real value for the planet and human beings. But it's funny that somewhere high up in this whole structure, there are very, very conscientious people who understand and are humbled by technology. How do you observe that dichotomy, you know, between very conscientious business people and not so conscientious business people in your world?
So I think there is the not understanding, but this, you know, link with consciousness and being very conscious and opening up to what's going there, which is more relying on the spirituality. And then there is the reality of the world we're living in, which has certain rules. And so even if you have a great motive to make a change, it's needed to find a way within the existing reality where we're living to trick it and to use what's there to make a change. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big fan of, you know, business people who are also it's not who are also very, you know, very conscious, because they understood that to make an impact, they might have to play a little bit with the existing rule. Mm-hmm. And try to, you know, make it inside the matrix. So there are different ways of doing it. You know, you can just like be conscious and be like, okay, it's very hard to take action. And there are like some folks that have this understanding as well of the reality we're in, and make action. Yeah. I hope you understand what I'm saying. No, I sometimes I go a bit far.
No, it's like, here, let me ask you a very simple question, but this is, I know you don't have to give me a long answer, just, you know, your gut feeling, what it tells you. So who can affect change more? Private enterprise or government at this level when we need change?
Individuals. Yeah, a small group of people.
Amazing. I got the same answer from a woman I interviewed at the beginning of the week, a good friend who was trading carbon in Geneva. And she said, this is nonsense. I have to do something which relates to me. So you think it's the individuals and their consciousness that's important. Okay, yeah. Let me ask you another question. How fucked are we?
I'm a very optimistic person. I think we can make it.
Okay.
We need to believe. We built, if we put a dystopian future, this is what's going to happen. If we put a positive future as a direction, this is where we're going to go. So I'm a very optimistic person. I really believe that if we put this vision, we're going to go there.
Okay. So you're optimistic. What needs to happen for future? What do you see in your crystal ball?
Hope. Like you wake up every morning and you're like, okay, I'm hopeful the future is going to be like awesome. And so then you take action because you have a lot of hope and then you want to contribute to make this beautiful future happen. So I think we need to give people, we need to dream. We need to dream of a good future, being very aware also of the problems, of course, but dreaming and trying to achieve the dream, the common dream.
Okay, so a little bit of fantasy into the future with a bit of a positive. Okay, all right. Now, so last two questions. Say I'm cynical. I'm a person who's very cynical, and I say, Barbara, I can't change anything. I'd rather smoke a cigarette, have a drink, drive my car, and not do anything because I can't change anything.
Okay. At a certain point, sometimes some people they find living like this, and they are not connected at all with what's going on around them. So it doesn't even make them unhappy. I'm saying that, but I don't believe that. I believe at a certain point, by doing things that are counter nature, you're attacking yourself. And so you will start feeling unhappy. And what I want is for people to be happy. And I believe if you're like pursuing what is, you will wake up eventually at a certain point. The more you'll see people happy around you, the more you will be likely to jump on the change.
That's a beautiful thing, because actually it means that the change begins from within. So, yes. And I think that cynical people sometimes are the ones that hurt the most, which can't. I remember as a child, I even saw how messed up the world was in terms of ecology. And in Colombia, we saw a lot of destruction of certain habitats, and I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to see the nature because I felt it was hurting. And so I think that being cynical was the only way of dealing with it. Okay, so last question. Suppose I'm not cynical, but say I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical. I'm like, no, my car, it's not going to make a difference. The mammoths died, of like an ice age, and, that happens every thousands of years, and global warming and cooling. We're just fleas on this very big dog. It doesn't make a difference.
Okay. That's fine, because actually the point of this, like developing environmental solution, I don't want people to jump into environmental solution only because it's environmental friendly. The products that people are building right now needs to be better. Like, let's talk about the car. The goal is not to put you under pressure so you switch to an electric car. The goal is that the electric car is going to be so awesome that you will get rid of, you know, your old it's a gasoline car. So yeah, I think this is something very important, especially for like green technology and like environmental solution we're developing, is really focusing on not only of like solving the climate crisis, but it's building product that people really want to use, so they make a change, you know, based on the value added of the product, and not only the fact that it's environmental friendly.
Yeah, we observe that. We observe that very much in a social enterprise, where people are coming much, you know, initially it was about what's the impact I can make, but at the end of the day, you also want a certain, you need it to work. I mean, especially in what you are doing, right? Where you are driven on the one hand by creating solutions to further humanity, right? Even take us to different places and this and that. And I really love the way you've said that you focus going to space really as being more considerate of the world we live in. Tell me, please, what do you see happening with your enterprise and human beings in the next couple of years? When are we going to be on the moon? When are we going to be on Mars?
Yeah. Okay. Humanity is going to go back to the moon most probably around 2024, 2025. Then we're going to prepare for Mars, which is going to happen a little around 10 years from now. What we're going to do, we're going to build a lot of stations on Earth, like around 10 stations in the 10 coming years. That's what the plan for the company. Then the idea for people to understand is really that you'll go on Interstellar website, you just put the number of people, you know, how you want to grow your food, what you need, like the different requirements, and then we give you the solution. And so like, what plants do you need to select? How do you build a greenhouse? How do you build the aeroponics? So it's really, we want to, at a certain point, I would like to, you know, open source the tools that we've been developing, so people learn how to build a small like vivarium or like ecological villages all around the world. So that's one of the goals that we have for like in the 15 coming years. And yes, humans will live on Earth. We'll build a base on the moon, and then we'll go to Mars, and we'll be alive to see that. It's going to happen.
But one thing I never asked you about, but I see is very clear, is that if I mean, you're building these places to prototype, for example, you know, extra terrestrial inhabitation. But as a matter of fact, what you're creating is also a template for regenerative communities and living. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So the idea is that, you know, we still need a little bit of work, but let's say you're 100 people, you get a land on Earth, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we build, you know, the efficient and regenerative system so we can grow the food, recycle the water, and recycle the waste in a closed loop system. And that's because this is the opportunity to have for space, that we can take that and give that to people on Earth. So we already know how to do it. We are just adding technology, you know, complementary to like the ancestral approach that have been designed. But that's yes.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Really, you know, by looking up to the stars, we're actually learning a lot more about ourselves.
Exactly.
And by focusing on our technology and tools, we realize that we really would need to improve ourselves and our conscientiousness to make this work. Barbara, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jurgis.
Thank you very much for your time. It was beautiful talking to you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Me too.
Looking forward to seeing you. And until we meet again, a big kiss on my behalf.
Bye.